أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Selamun Aleyküm ve Rahmetullahi ve Berekatuhu. Okay, inshallah we will continue with the 14th droplet. This is 19th word, but inshallah we will continue with the part. If you ask why does the all-wise Quran not speak of beings in the same way as philosophy and science?
Okay, so we are reading from the 19th word, page 251. The question: if you ask, why does the all-wise Quran not speak of beings in the same way as philosophy and science? It leaves some matters in brief form, and some it speaks of in a simple and superficial way. It leaves some matters in brief form, and some it speaks of in a simple and superficial way that is easy in the general view, does not wound general feelings, and does not weary or tax the minds of ordinary people. Why is this? By way of an answer, we say, philosophy has strayed from the path of truth. Philosophy has strayed from the path of truth. That's why. Also, of course, you have understood from past words and what they teach that the all-wise Quran speaks of the universe in order to make known the divine essence. The all-wise Quran speaks of the universe in order to make known the divine essence, attributes, and names. That is, it explains the meanings of the book of the universe to make known its creator. It explains the meanings of the book of the universe to make known its creator. That means it looks at beings, not for themselves, but for their creator. It looks at beings, not for themselves, but for their creator. Also, it addresses everyone. It addresses everyone. But philosophy and science look at beings for themselves. Philosophy and science look at beings for themselves and addresses scientists in particular. In which case, since the all-wise Quran makes beings evidences and proofs, the evidence has to be superficial so that it will be quickly understood in the general view. Philosophy and science look at beings for themselves and addresses scientists in particular. In which case, since the all-wise Quran makes beings evidences and proofs, the evidence has to be superficial so that it will be quickly understood in the general view. And since the Quran of guidance addresses all classes of men, the ordinary people, which form the most numerous class, want guidance which is concise with unnecessary things being vague, and which brings subtle things close with comparisons, and which does not change things which are in their superficial view are obvious into an unnecessary or even harmful form, lest it causes them to fall into error. And since the Quran of guidance addresses all classes of men, the ordinary people, which form the most numerous class, want guidance which is concise with unnecessary things being vague, and which brings subtle things close with comparisons, and which does not change things in their superficial view, are obvious into an unnecessary or even harmful form, lest it causes them to fall into error. For example, it says about the sun is a revolving lamp or lantern. The sun is a revolving lamp or lantern. For it does not speak of the sun for itself and its nature, but because it is a sort of mainspring of an order and center of a system. But because it is a sort of mainspring of an order and center of a system, and order and system are mirrors of the maker's skill. It says, the sun runs its course. The sun runs its course. Quran chapter 36, verse 38. That is, the sun revolves. through calling to mind the orderly disposals of divine power in the revolutions of winter and summer, and day and night with the phrase, the sun revolves, it makes understood the Maker's tremendousness. Through calling to mind the orderly disposals of divine power in the revolutions of winter and summer, and day and night, with the phrase, the sun revolves, it makes understood the Maker's tremendousness. Thus, whatever the reality of this revolving does not affect the order, which is woven and observed, and which is the purpose. Thus, whatever the reality of this revolving, it does not affect the order, which is woven and observed, and which is the purpose. It also says, and set the sun as a lamp. And set the sun as a lamp, Quran chapter 71, verse 16. Through depicting the word lamp, the world in the form of a palace, and the things within it as decorations, necessities and provisions prepared for man and living beings, and inferring that the sun is also a subjugated candle holder, it makes known the mercy and bestowal of the Creator. Through depicting through the word lamp, the world in the form of a palace, and the things within it as decorations, necessities and provisions prepared for man and living beings, and inferring that the sun is also a subjugated candle holder, it makes known the mercy and bestowal of the Creator. Now look and see what this foolish and prattling philosophy says. The sun is a vast burning liquid mass. It causes the planets which have been flung off from it to revolve around it. Its mass is such and such. It is this, it is that. The sun is a vast burning liquid mass. It causes the planets which have been flung off from it to revolve around it. Its mass is such and such. It is this, it is that. It does not afford the spirit the satisfaction and fulfillment of true knowledge, just a terrible dread and fearful wonder. It does not afford the spirit the satisfaction and fulfillment of true knowledge, just a terrible dread and fearful wonder. It does not speak of it as the Quran does. You may understand from this the value of the matters of philosophy, whose inside is hollow and outside ostentatious. You may understand from this the value of the matters of philosophy, whose inside is hollow and outside ostentatious. So do not be deceived by its glittering exterior, and be disrespectful towards the most miraculous expositions of the Quran. O God, make the Quran healing for us, the writer of this and his peers, from all ills, and a companion to us, and to them in our lives and after our deaths, and in this world and in the grave, and at the last judgment an intercessor, and on the bridge a light, and from the fire a screen and shield, and in paradise a friend, and in all good deeds a guide and leader, through your grace and beneficence and mercy. O most magnificent of the magnificent and most merciful of the merciful. Amen. O God, make the Quran healing for us, the writer of this and his peers, from all ills, and a companion to us, and to them in our lives and after our deaths, and in this world and in the grave, and at the last judgment an intercessor. And on the bridge a light, and the fire a screen and shield, and in paradise a friend, and in all good deeds a guide and leader, through your grace and beneficence and mercy. O most magnificent of the magnificent and most merciful of the merciful. Amen. O God, grant blessings and peace to the one to whom the all-wise Quran, the distinguisher between truth and falsehood, was revealed, and to all his family and companions. Amen. Amen. And that is the end of the 19th word.
Jazakallah khair. So you can start from the beginning or as you wish, like just however you want to continue.
Well, I'd like to hear from others, but just my quick summary thoughts. The question is fundamentally asking, And it's, interesting. I was having this same discussion. Interesting coincidence, I guess, if there are any really coincidences, with somebody else today. In that the Quran doesn't really, it's not there as a book of science or a textbook. Because as Nursi says, science in and of itself, as it exists today, exists for describing things for their own sake, not for any sort of true understanding of their reality. To describe the sun, for example, in this case, he gives the example, the Quranic example of the sun, to describe the sun as, oh, it has this mass, or it revolves this way, it has this speed, it will end this way, its life will be this long, is, in a sense, fundamentally irrelevant to the human being, the human condition, because it doesn't satisfy the human being of how is it there, what is the purpose of its existence, what does it mean to me, and what am I to do with it? You can give me any sort of magnificent description, but it doesn't address the human state. What are these human questions? And that's why the Quran doesn't address things from a scientific perspective, in the sense that, because it doesn't serve the purpose of looking to the creator, looking to that thing's creator, knowing that creator by the qualities manifest in that thing. I don't know if superficial is the right translation. I don't know if that's what Nursi used, but I would say it has to be apparent. The evidence has to be apparent. The purpose of it has to be apparent to everyone, if it's to be the absolute word of the creator of the universe, so that all individuals of all capacities can understand. And if the understanding is apparent, the point is it must address this aspect that looks to everybody's human state. Because not everyone really, truthfully, does anyone really need to know about the nature of the sun as its, empirical aspect? No one really needs to know, in a sense. But what I do need to know is, what does it mean? What is it there for, and what does it indicate? What does it say about its maker? And that's the difference between the philosophy of science and the Quranic worldview, and how it makes use of the universe, how it explains the universe, what it means. And I like what Nursi said, don't be deceived by it, this ostentatiousness. Because I was discussing with some people yesterday, they were in a sense of bringing the same issue up. People are, enthralled, they're sort of wowed by individuals who proclaim themselves as the prophets of this day and age, these, material scientists, how they are able to explain the universe, even though when you examine how the assumptions they make, the fact that they describe things for their own sake, that they all look toward themselves, they don't indicate anything else other than themselves, people are enamored by that. And then they look at the Quran and say, oh, well, it's just something that it sounds nice. I kind of just have to follow it on blind, or just kind of on faith alone. Whereas these scientists, they seem to speak truth. And that's ostentatious. That's the ostentatiousness of philosophy today, which is the prevalent philosophy is the philosophy of science. And the dua at the end is interesting. I'll leave that for if somebody else wants to explain it. But in a sense, the Quran is the intercession, and in that intercession, it's a healing for the human being, because it makes an individual satisfied with his existence in the universe and what the universe means. So that's what I generally took away. If anybody has any thoughts, or if we want to go paragraph by paragraph, we can do that too. Anyone have any initial thoughts before we delve a little deeper into it? Okay. I guess, do you want me to start with the question itself or with the answer?
Oh, sorry for the delay. I was trying to pass the key somewhere. I guess we can start with the question.
Okay.
Because I think it's important to understand the question.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, the first, part of the question is asking, why does the all-wise Quran not speak of beings in the same way as philosophy and science? at least some matters in brief form, and some it speaks of in a simple and superficial way that is easy in the general view. Does not wound general feelings, and does not weary or tax the minds of ordinary people. So, the first statement is all-wise Quran. And I think, I don't know, is the questioner really asked that, or just Nursi's posing a question hypothetically? Which sounds like I think he's asking just a hypothetical question, a hypothetical questioner. And I think he's using all-wise Quran specifically because it's in the wisdom of the Quran to speak about things in a simple and superficial way. Apparently, apparent superficial way that's easy in the general view. And that's the wisdom, the absolute wisdom of the speech of the Creator. Compared to philosophy and science that seems to try to sort of distract people from the truth, or murky the waters. In that's what I take away from this question. And he says, does not wound general feelings, does not weary or tax the minds of ordinary people. Well, at least when I understand from wounding general feelings, meaning the Quran doesn't come to sort of proclaim itself as to the individual reading it, as if you can't understand it. So I'm not hurt by the fact that I can't understand it, because he uses very simple examples. It like when you read a difficult book, you want to throw it away. So that's sometimes how I may feel. Like, I don't understand it, just get rid of it. This is too much for me. But the Quran is not like that. And the same way, it doesn't make me feel inadequate or deficient, in a sense. I may not know, but it doesn't make me feel sort of inferior when compared to science, or how science is presented, the philosophy of science is presented. So I took away from this question, if anybody has thoughts about that.
So when I read the question, as you were saying, like whether it is really posed or hypothetical, I can, at least as far as I am concerned, I can easily say that this is a question that I can ask myself. Because I guess, just to be honest to ourselves, when you open Quran and read, let's say, the parts related to sun, since the author gives the example, when you read them, they really like it very superficial, right? The first read. But when or let's say they're very simple facts. Sometimes they are not even facts, like we set or put sun as a lamp. But this is not a quote-unquote a fact that you can discuss with, that you are accustomed to seeing, let's say, textbooks about sun, or even newspaper. Like, you don't see such stuff, right? And on the contrary, when you look at the writings of science and philosophy, when it comes to sun, for instance, they are so, as author says, so glittering. Like, they list all the facts about the sun. They can even measure the mass of the sun by, I don't know, playing some optical gadgets or some other readings from Earth. Like, without going to sun, they can even measure the mass of the sun, I don't know, some other properties of the sun, and most of the times they are very accurate. And they make all these connections with the features of the sun, the properties of the sun, with the properties of the other beings. How plants, for instance, extract energy from sunlight. The amount of energy they extract, the amount of energy that we use in our body through plants, all the chemical and other kind of interactions or actions taking place in sun or around the sun, and so on and so forth. Right? They write all these books about them, versus we set the sun as a lamp. So I guess comparison is not even fair. Like when you look at the from a superficial perspective, comparison is not even fair. Like if you try to compare to with the regular people, like let's say most of the people you interact with in your daily life, they will not even waste their time by making fun of you. This is even waste of time. Like this is like the unfairness is so big.
It's ridiculous.
Yes, yes, and also from again very superficial perspective, as a believer, you're not that much excited knowing the sun was set as a lamp that you want to share it with others. Right? The excitement is not there. Like when you read Quran and see that the Creator tells you we set sun as a lamp, you not get excited and try to share it with others. But when you read very interesting fact, again quote unquote, a fact about sun, for instance, how sunlight, the amount of sunlight reaching the earth changing due to green gases or some other, the changes in our atmosphere, and how it affects the sea level or, I don't know, the temperature in the poles, North Pole, the South Pole, how do you call the region?
Poles.
Okay, poles. You are so ready to share it with others, right? Or when you hear an anecdote about sun or the sunlight, the energy, whatever, you talk it with your friends at university or at workplace, but not the fact that the sun was set as a lamp. It doesn't excite you. So it's not a topic of a deep conversation, let's say. So yeah, going back to Suhail's rhetorical question, whether it is hypothetical or just was it really raised by someone, I can easily say that yes, this is raised by myself, the question. Another question?
Berkan, Assalamu alaikum. I have a funny story actually. And at my work, I was, speaking to a person, like a guy, like in our team. We were waiting for one of the guys to come into our meeting, and one of the, our colleagues, for half an hour, he was talking about French fries at different places. Seriously, I really got a headache out of that. I'm like, my goodness, how much can I hear about how each restaurant has their way of cutting versus, frying and double frying and with the cheese, with different sauce. And I'm like, please. And in the same, when you were saying that we don't get excited in terms of sharing, imagine if you say, hey, look at the potato to someone, what is the reaction that you will get? All right. If you say, hey, look at the sun, it's shining. Imagine how, what we have become, that excitement is no longer there. People say, yeah, everybody knows that. Tell me more, like how the way, the description, what it does, what is going on within, how the gases are flowing in, how the burning is done. So that's kind of the state and condition of what, we are ourselves. We are looking at, we get excited based on, the details of the descriptions that is happening. And here the Quran is there telling us, in a simple way that everybody can understand. But it's talking more from the existential point of view. Look at, like when it says the sun, look at the existence or the creation of that. And that's what I think we need to work on. That's just some of the highlight I took away from the question.
Jazakallah khair. Does anyone have any other thoughts about the question? It's interesting you brought that up, Bassem. He says, does not weary or tax the minds of ordinary people. At least theoretically, I don't, maybe others are different, but I don't feel tired by thinking about the existential side of things. But I do agree, I do often get tired by thinking about the empirical side of things. You know, the details, what this, that means, or how is it this way and not that way, and you know, a description or a measurement. But contemplating about what something means, what does it mean existentially speaking? That's, in a sense, the Quran is not tiring in that respect. Maybe that's just how I feel. I don't know how people feel generally in that regard, but that's kind of how I look at it.
And also, this question might be understood in the reverse angle, meaning that if I am trying to find some scientific truth in Quran, am I really looking at Quran in the right way? Because yeah, it is as you were saying, it's clear that we get this feeling that Quran is not giving that much detail, but there's this other tendency to say that if Quran shows some scientific knowledge which was not possible 1,000 years ago, then we will prove the truthfulness of Quran as such. And if not, then we feel bad. If we found, then we say, wow, that's great. So this might be another way to take it. Is it really, shall we really look for it?
I definitely agree. The danger is that, you know, people want to turn, in their defense of the Quran, they want to turn it into a science book in order to prove its truthfulness. So they want to say the Quran is truthful because it gives you scientific descriptions about the world. But that's no different than the philosophy of science, and that you're still talking about things for their own sake, not because of what they mean. What do they indicate? What do they necessitate? That's turning it into a science book is in a way secularizing the Quran, if we can say that. Anybody else have any thoughts about the question?
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, like even the philosophy and Quran, they both speak of creation and beings, right? But one speaks in a particular way and then the other speaks in a different kind of way. So the way the language in the Quran is speaking, it can tell you like, okay, you know, the sun, I'm indicating why I am drawing your attention on it because I am the maker of that. So there's that notion of, you know, the one who made the universe is speaking from one side, although they both talk about the same things, but science cannot claim or say anything like, you know, science made this, although they might have some other ways of running around and showing that, but there's a clear distinction in terms of how they differentiate in terms of speaking of creation.
You know, one thing I'll say though to that point, I don't think science says anything. It's what people say about the world. You know, if you take science as a definition of something that explains the world, if you think about it, that has to include the existence of a thing. It's just that people choose not to address it. So it's because people then may say, well, then is there a distinction between the Quran and the universe? And as Nursi points out, there's nothing, because the Quran explains the meaning of the universe. In truth, science really should be doing the same thing, because if you study the universe, you are only led to the existence of a thing, and then it's necessary to ask the question, how does it exist? What does its existence mean? It's just that the philosophy of science, how they choose to interpret what they study, they don't want to address that question. Does anyone else have any other thoughts? Okay, so I guess we can go on to the answer then. By way of an answer, we say, philosophy has strayed from the path of the truth. That's why. I guess we have to go a little bit further to understand why he's saying that.
Oh, Suhail, if you don't mind, like just before going further, I really like the way he started. Like, because the question is so, seems to be complicated, deep, right? It requires all these discussions and explanations, but it starts with a very simple answer, which covers all. It says, oh, it's so simple because philosophy has strayed from the path of truth, that's why. Like, you don't have to go, yes, he will give all these explanations and the reasons why he concluded, but it's not like, they complement each other, one has its own way, the other one it's the other way. The religion is for, the personal the life, the philosophy or science is for communities, whatever. Like all these other explanations.
Science answers how.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly what you hear.
Distinctions and so on. Like he says, no, like there's no such thing. The only reason they differ because philosophy has strayed from the path of truth. That's all. So yeah, go ahead, please. Sorry for interruption.
No, that's great. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I guess there's not really much more to say other than that because I think Yusuf said, well, there's the religion and then there's science, and you said religion's personal and science is objective, whatever that means. But religion's not. But as he's saying here, no, they're both look to the same thing. But philosophy has gone astray, essentially, in that it's gone from, it's left the truth or the path of truth, and that's why you said they differ. But in a sense, they're one and the same. They look to the same thing. And then he says, also, of course, you've understood from past words and what they teach that the all-wise Quran speaks of the universe in order to make known the divine essence, attributes, and names. I guess this can be said what the path of truth is, in that it speaks of the universe. So it's still using the same thing, what science utilizes, the same sort of observation, analysis, or the thing that one is, considering, the universe and all it contains. But the Quran is using it in order to make known the divine essence, and therefore that divine essence's name and attributes. That's the path of truth I think he's referring to, that philosophy has strayed from, because that's not its objective. Anyone want to add any comments on that?
I guess one thing that we can, I guess, just like every sentence, this sentence also can be read in different ways. It says they teach that the past words and what they teach anyway, they show all-wise Quran speaks of the universe in order to make known the divine essence, attributes, and names. So, like you can say that the purpose of Quran is different and very specific. It only deals with the divine names and the attributes and the divine essence, and that's the reason it's different from the philosophy. Otherwise, what philosophy is saying is also can be true, or it could be also useful, or whatever. But Quran has this specific reason or specific purpose, and that's the reason it just concentrates on this aspect of the reality, right? Like, as if, this is also a possible way of reading it, but I guess we shouldn't forget the first sentence. Again, the philosophy has strayed from the path of truth. So it's not, the author here, he's not trying to make a division, like the division of labor. Quran will deal with this part of the reality. On the other hand, philosophy, science, or other, let's say, intellectual, what is the word?
Pursuit.
Yeah, pursuits. Will deal with the other aspects of the reality. So there is a division of labor here. I guess this is not the case. when the way I understand, at least, when he says all-wise Quran speaks of the universe in order to make known the divine essence, attributes, and the names, author tried to tell us that this is the only truth. And this is what Quran trying to make. Anything beyond divine essence, divine names, and the attributes is nothing but waste of time. It's even like worse than waste of time because it's going astray from the truth.
Now, what would you say if I come to you and I say, oh, okay, well, you're saying that, that's nice, but it sounds like you're anti-progress or anti-development or anti-investigation. How would you answer that? Because look at the wonder science has done, so to speak.
Actually, he's pro. That's what he would say.
I am pro what?
Pro progress.
Oh yeah, I am part of the progress. You are either part of the progress or against it. So, I guess this is a good question. Actually, not like to be honest. It's not, to be frank. I'm not talking about you, but the question that we always encounter, such questions in our life. I don't think these are good questions at all. Because it's like, I'm talking, let's say, the beauty of the dress I'm having, like not the beauty of the dress, but maybe I used the wrong word, but I'm talking about the talent of the tailor.
Art.
The art, yes, manifested on the, let's say, the clothes you are wearing, and talking about the art of the tailor who made it. And then you asking me, wait a second, don't you care about your clothes protecting you from cold or not? Like, it's like, there's no space for, or there's no reason to pose such a question. I'm not saying that the clothes you are wearing is protecting you from the cold. Yes, it does, which is part of the art. So whoever made these clothes for you, the dress for you, also considered your, the needs and your desires, your weaknesses, and made them not only beautiful, but also in a way so that it will protect you from the cold. And it is part of the art. I guess the same way, like the thing as we call as progress, it's already included in the divine attributes and the names. As we've been discussing, I guess it was a part of the Memorial Day retreat that we were discussing the all names being taught to Adam. There we discussed a little bit about the progress, the science, the quote-unquote made, and so on. It is part of the names that we've been taught. The progress we see, or order in the universe we see, which science and philosophy relies on, it is already part of the names that I'm talking about. So it's not excluded.
I think what is the claim of the philosophy?
Is there a claim? I don't know.
The philosophy is there, or at least the claim is there or saying that they are trying to explore the mystery of the existence. Isn't that the case?
Yeah.
But is that an existential claim, or is that just simply an empirical claim?
I guess it's just
Doesn't matter.
used loosely, like a mystery
to
of the universe.
They want to understand how this universe came to be, and that is the primary question. And this is what they are pursuing to understand, right? But the problem is, everything is within the universe. Like, we are trying the existence of the universe within the universe itself, which leads the philosophy to draw some sort of relations between the different beings in the universe. Like, for example, in this specific example, that like Earth relation to the sun, the rest of the universe, like then from there, like end of the time, or the like the end of the sun itself, the black spot in the sun, how like all those like dark, what do you call it, the dark matter, how it's going to eventually like, so it keeps going, right? And it gets like more and more complicated, but there's really no answer. Like the deeper you go into, the more questions you come up with, and the more relationships with you come up with, and it becomes like more and more complex, which is like a dead end. Like it doesn't really take you anywhere. And at the end, like you are here sitting with an intense desire to permanently exist, but you have the dark matters in the universe that you know that one day everything is gonna vanish. So how does that really make you feel? Like when Suhail first started, like he talked about how Quran versus philosophy, like in terms of the question, how it is really relates to man. So how does that really like, you may be the brightest person on earth in terms of understanding and drawing like relations and conclusions between the beings in the universe, but how does it you really make you feel in terms of like securing your own expectations and needs like for permanence?
Hatice, Beyza plus Ayşenur. They want to say something, I guess. I expect them to speak simultaneously, as name implies. So go ahead, please.
Assalamu alaikum. So I apologize if this was addressed before, but I feel like we're working with a very broad term here, the word philosophy. And I was wondering, with what definition of philosophy are we kind of pursuing this discussion? And I'm not just even saying in terms of like, is it this type of philosophical argument or that, but is it philosophy as a certain ideology, philosophy as a certain approach? And if so, can we really, I would say, put all the approaches that I guess philosophy can encompass, and again, this requires, I would say, a definition of what philosophy is under one umbrella. I mean, certainly there are many, philosophy as is taught in some ways or in some approaches certainly very limiting in that it as I think Brother Suhail had mentioned, it looks purely to the material, but at the same time, I think up until recent history, it was also termed as the handmaiden to theology, as a way of further understanding one's as a further way of understanding how one makes sense of the beliefs that they have, or in further structuring their belief system. So I'm wondering again, I think primarily what definition, because I think Nursi, to the extent of my knowledge, has a very specific understanding or type, if you will, of philosophy that he is talking about when he says philosophy. But I think some definitions, and maybe this is philosophical in itself, but I think some definitions are necessary so as to, at least for me, kind of further clarify the premises of this discussion.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, at least when Nursi references philosophy, I think he's one philosophy being the process of trying to understand the things around you and yourself, because it addresses what do things mean, in a sense. And I think the philosophy he's referring to is the philosophy in which it does it under a secular materialist viewpoint. That's why it's straight from the path of truth, because that's, if you think about it, every sort of interpretation of the world today is colored or by secular materialist philosophy, whether it's in any sort of science, art, literature. It's all, I mean, in a sense, colored by the same secular materialist nihilistic ideas in a way, as their approach to trying to understand who they are, what is one doing in the world, what does everything mean. So that's what I think Nursi is generally meaning by philosophy.
Maybe one addition. So the translator actually made a really great job here, because in the original text there is no science. In the original text, in the Turkish, it's only philosophy, felsefe. Some other parts of the text, he talks about, what's the word? Ilmi hikmet, maybe translated science, or the science of knowledge, maybe. Or when he talks about, when the translator says the scientist, the author says ehli fen, the people who's dealing with fen or sciences. But other than that, it's all philosophy. But translator, everywhere she says, translator. The translator says philosophy and science. I guess this is a great translation, like capturing the main idea what Nursi was trying to say, because at least in our time and his time, there's a one dominant way of thinking when it comes to philosophy, let's say, which is highly affected by a scientific worldview. I guess this is my guess. So when he talks about the philosophy, he's referring to the philosophy which have a marriage in terms of the worldview with the current sciences, and with the sciences as well. Like, we can question, what do you mean with this science? I guess he's not referring to, let's say, a scientific quote-unquote method. Like, if you multiply this with that, you will get this kind of conclusion, and then you can test this conclusion by applying this experiment. There's nothing wrong with this. We apply it every day. When we cook, for instance, we use scientific method, right? When we arrange, for instance, adjust the fire level, like, it's a scientific method. Depending on your past experiences, you're making an inference and so on and so forth. When he says science, I guess he's talking about a current worldview, a common and dominant worldview, in which, as author very clearly explains, in which things are being studied in terms of themselves. Like what you said better.
No, for themselves. Yeah.
For themselves, yes. Things are studied for themselves. And you see the examples of such an approach or such a purpose in everywhere. When you question, for instance, what is mind, right? It is studied for mind itself, or how we can use this knowledge in our daily life, or in making advances or progression, as Suhail was saying, in our life. So I guess this is at least the way I understand, this is how he defines philosophy and science. If you're studying things for themselves, whatever the topic is, even if you are studying angels or spirit for themselves, you are doing philosophy and science. Even if you are studying God, a God, let's say, for like as an object, just studying for the sake of studying, how he created things, when he started to creating, and so on and so forth, whatever it means. You're still following a philosophical or scientific approach, the way I see. This is one thing. There's another thing I want to add about, I guess, Yusuf, you want to say something
I was just going to say, I mean, you already told it, but for example, when it comes to morality, which is again a topic that is being discussed a lot in philosophy, and it's not material apparently, we're talking about human behavior, but if it is not based on what's the purpose of morality, or I mean, if it doesn't say anything about beyond this world, so meaning that if there's nothing in terms of this is put here for a purpose, or I am being disturbed by this behavior, or I like this behavior, and if I have an answer for because other than this 60, 70 years of my life, if I have an answer which goes beyond my life and the life of this existence, then yeah, I am philosophizing, I guess.
Like what I understand from this is, or from the philosophy itself, any approach that one can take with the bias that I'm gonna explain the existence of it within itself. Could be anything. So like having that bias, okay, I'm gonna try to like find the answers of the existence, but I have the bias to explain it within the like actual like creation itself. Taking that approach is the philosophical approach. That's what I understand from it.
At least the dominant philosophical approach that we know of today.
So it is like that attitude, like that bias that one takes even before like even ask the question.
So I guess again on the same line, we sometimes take an attitude of saying, for instance, myself, like I find myself most of the time in this attitude that, oh, but do you know what? Like before, it was not like this. You know, the philosophers were not like today's philosophers or today's scientists. Let's not make as a a camp of people. But it doesn't have to be this way. Before philosophy was X or Y or Z, it doesn't matter. Yes, it could be true. Like it could be true in all God and all the good days. Maybe that was the case. But for me, for now at least, I guess this kind of claim, a philosophy has as straight from the path of truth, both it makes sense because it speaks to me today, and also, to be honest, I need such a language because this is the way I communicate my thoughts. Like I use a word in today's context with today's meaning. So that's one thing. Another thing I want to add, and this is not like a criticizing the people, but just as a reminder, we always, when we like try to describe this philosophy of science, let's say science, it's I guess easier to criticize. We use this word materialist, right? The materialist science or materialist philosophy. This is my personal view, but I really believe that this word, even for scientists themselves, it's becoming obsolete. Why I'm saying that? Because like even academic works, you see references to things that you don't know the material aspect yet, right? So even scientific articles can have references to such stuff. Like even, I guess the basic example would be mind. Although there are some school of thought which equates mind with the brain, this is just one school of thought, and not everybody follows the same path. I'm not trying to glorify anything. I'm just saying that it really doesn't matter whether we equate things with the material or not. Even if we take them as immaterial things, as long as we study things for themselves, it's still the philosophy and science that Nursi criticized. So it doesn't matter whether it is material or not. Because as I said, like even in the scientific circles, things becoming more and more immaterial every day. It doesn't make them any better.
Artificial intelligence age.
Yes, we talked about all these immaterial things today, and it's not making them any better. So we should be very careful when we say, like when we define things, when we use the word materialist. It sounds as if all the problem is with whether things are material or not. For instance, as if we would start talking about angels or some things unseen, everything would be resolved, all the issue would be resolved. And this is not the case. As Osman was saying, I guess the crux of the problem is studying things within the system itself, not going beyond it, not going to what they indicate. What is their purpose? What is their meaning? Not questioning these questions.
You may not at the beginning, you may not even know that like they actually indicates to something. Like that's not even like, it is even like, I think that's one step like further. It's just like having the open-mindedness to the, like being open to the option that actually the reason for the existence to be might be like out of the existence itself, let's say, like, or this type of existence itself. For example, like having the open-mindedness or the fact that the table over there, existence of that table over there actually may be like something other than the table itself. There might be, or there something or someone that might be the cause of that table. Having that openness, I think, makes the difference. Like if you do have the bias saying that I'm going to explain the existence of the table, but within that context only, like within the table itself, in that context only, having that like bias takes you to like that end. Like because of that attitude, you have no other option other than drawing like relations between the part of the tables. There are 4 legs, and there is like some sort of like flat surface on top of the sitting on top of the 4 legs, and then you go into the specifics of it. And if you want to go deeper and deeper, you go to the atomic level of the table, and you just continue like that's how at the atomic level. Then there is no end to it. You can just even like within that simple example itself, like you can draw so many relations to a point that like you can get lost on it. And at the end, like, what does it really tell you as a human being?
I guess understanding the problem in this way, as you were describing, is so important. Because this is the problem. Otherwise, problem is not what kind of relations they drive or what kind of objects they talk about. This is not the problem. It wouldn't be any better, let's say, if they were saying, oh yeah, there are 4 legs of the table, but there are also invisible 3 others, which are in some other dimensions that we cannot see, and there the creatures are flying or whatever. Like it wouldn't make it any better. It would be just absurd speculation, nothing more. Just like we constantly speculate about flying angels. And that's the reason, I guess, Nursi says, but philosophy and science look at beings for themselves. Like this is the crux of the problem. And I don't want to divert us too much, but we see all these examples, like the discussions among believers, for instance. You want?
Yeah, like just something very quick. And I'm not really sure if like here, like Nursi necessarily attacks the philosophy as philosophy. I think it is more like, to me, telling me that, hey, listen, there are just two different, in a way, approach. One is Quranic versus one philosophy, that you may have any one of them. And when you read the Quran, you need to read that kind of mindset. Or in other words, it was kind of mentioned, when you read the Quran, don't read it as a science book that will draw all kinds of relations between the earth and the sun and all kinds of mathematical empirical formulas. You cannot read the Quran as such. If you do, then you are going to make the Quran into a philosophy book that you will not benefit from it.
What I was saying, yeah, we see all these examples. For instance, talking about the same problem as Nursi is talking here, but taking it very lightly. So, for instance, when we talk about such comparisons, science, philosophy, and so on, we say they talk about all the neural systems, the chemical reactions in the body, but there is love, right? You cannot deny this. There is love. There is all these, emotions we have. As if religion is about such romantic things. As if we can prove that there is love, which is not denied by anyone, by the way, if we can prove that there is love, which cannot be studied in the laboratory, everything would be great. But from Nursi's definition, he says, but philosophy and science look at the beings for themselves. So if you are studying love and you're talking about the love you have for your wife, and you're saying that my wife is so beautiful and I love her, or I'm so handsome so my wife loves me, you are doing the same thing. Doesn't matter whether your neural system generating the love or not. The problem is not the source of, the wrong word, sorry. The problem is not the type of things that you are studying or where you are studying, whether in laboratory or in, the alchemist shop. The problem is in name of what you are studying them.
So, I'll just reiterate what you said with an example. So, taking philosophy as a way of thinking, if we define philosophy as that, this is not what is being attacked in here. Because thinking is part of you. You use your intellect for thinking. But this definitely, the author is criticizing the common usage of the term, or how it is being used in the society today. And for a practical example for that, if I tell you that don't waste your time with television, it is devil, if I tell you, you will definitely understand that I'm not talking about this box over there, because this machine can broadcast good things as well. I mean, it can be a very well widespread education tool for humanity. But you and I both know that 99.9% of the time, this machine is being used for wasting people's lives or making them spend more money, this and that. So now television doesn't mean just a box for us. It's much more than that. It's now a behavior. It's like a flood, if you like. So likewise, when the author is talking about philosophy, it's not like the act of thinking or the act of questioning, things like that, for sure. This would be defining television like the box. But as in day-to-day language, you would, when you say television or when you say social media is bad, for example, I mean, it's in terms of technical tool, it is something that can be used for good or bad, depending, and it's pretty much like a knife. I mean, you can chop food with it or kill people with it. But if a weapon, for example, is being used for killing others wrongfully instead of protecting yourself, So you can be very well against gun ownership. This wouldn't mean that, oh, you mean that I should not protect myself? No, that's not the point. If weapons are being used 99% of the time for killing others, then this is the part that I'm criticizing, you would say. So I guess in here, we should be understanding it as such. And definitely, I guess it is beyond explanation to say that nobody is coming against the act of thinking in here.
Oh, so great discussion. Anyone want to add anything else to this so far? Yeah, one thing I really liked was what Birkan said, just to kind of emphasize. I never thought about it this way, but yeah, you're right. I mean, there are physicists who try to explain consciousness, and try to empirically, measure it, demonstrate it. So I guess you can call them immaterialists too. I mean, it's in a sense the same thing as that, as Osman was saying, that they're looking to explain the things within their own selves, within their own self, rather than looking to something not of their own nature. And I guess that's what we can classify as philosophy here. Does anybody else want to add anything else before I go on to the next sentence? Okay, well, I guess we're up to also it addresses everyone. It referring to the all-wise Quran. This I kind of find interesting because if it addresses everyone, who does philosophy address? And I was going to say, does it address anyone then? Does it even, maybe it's no one, because is it addressing a human need, a human question? And philosophy and science may not do that. But he says, philosophy and science look at beings for themselves and address scientists in particular. So I don't know if anybody has thoughts on that. Maybe these scientists aren't concerned with their human questions, and that's why it addresses them alone. But I'd like to hear what anybody else has to think about that.
I think the first thing comes to my mind, philosophy then, or scientists, it's an occupation. But Quran is not or cannot be actually it is, unfortunately, but cannot be an occupation.
Shouldn't be.
Well, what do you mean by that, occupation?
Like, for example, like, there should not be like clergy who make the religion or the Quran their like jobs, in a way, source of income. And it is the same thing for like scientists. So it is, I'm not sure if it is rather really like looking for the answers of the humanity, or it is just a job that you make like your living out of it.
Are clergy and scientists the same thing then, fundamentally?
I'm just like thinking loud,
I hope
but
this discussion doesn't go
Because I think that might be what you're saying. I don't know.
but it just sounds like they are the same. I don't know, but that wasn't my initial thought. But it seems like this is where it evolved, in quotation marks.
What is the word for marangos? The
carpentry.
Carpenter, yes. I guess it would be easier to think about another occupation like a carpenter, for instance. So I'm not sure the issue here is about the money or not. We can discuss, but let's assume there are certain, like a set of carpenters, a group of carpenters. They do their job just for fun. They like it, like they enjoy working with wood. So they make some furnitures and so on and so forth. And when they come together, when they share their experiences and so on, they use a specific language that they can understand. And I guess nobody can criticize them for this. Like they refer to some specific tools that only they know. or specific characteristics of wood that only they study, and so on and so forth. But they use this peculiar language, terminology among them. And this is, I guess, understandable. This is what I understand from here. Like, at least the second part. The first part, I guess, it's a broader critics. If philosophy and science look at the beings for themselves, this is something, I guess, should be criticized. But the second part, and address scientists in particular, I guess it's something that can be understood. Just like in carpenters, like they don't have to explain us anything. All they care is making a furniture in a better way. So let them make their furniture a better way.
But can you say? I don't know exactly. Maybe there's a reason why there's a comma, but can you say behind that language they hide behind that this jargon, this terminology, these words, in order to avoid the question of do things look to themselves or not?
This is very important. Yeah, I guess this is the crux of the problem. Like, yes, they have their peculiar language, which, again, I don't see any problem. But once they or we utilize this language to claim a superiority on others who doesn't share the same language, or claim that this is the language of the universe that should be used for everything, or the language itself proves that things should be studied for themselves, I guess problem starts there. For carpenters, for instance, it would be, I guess, funny, entertaining to hear that, everybody has to know all these characteristics of the woods or how to use these tools. And if you cannot use these tools, or if you do not know about the woods the way we know, you are inferior, you are lacking something, you are not intellectual enough, or whatever. It would be entertaining, I guess, to hear that. But when it comes to scientists, for some reason it does not.
Again, like this is like a joke. You take this as a joke. It shouldn't be necessarily a scientist. I was watching a video today. It was about evangelical pastors, especially in like the Bible Belt in the US. And some of those people, I didn't know that they have their own private jets. That's how rich they are, because there is a lot of their churches, like as big as like that, can like take thousands of people. So every Sunday they collect a lot of money, and they make a fortune out of it. So to a point that they can have their own private jets, and their reasoning is that like so they can go places to enlighten people. And one of the pastors was trying to justify why he has a private jet, saying that, can you imagine that if you don't have a private jet, that you are in this long tube, meaning the planes, like with other people, that are full with demons. So like, it is like very, like how you say, oxymoron, that like, those are the people that he is supposed to enlighten, but they call them demons. But like with his private jet, like I don't know where he's going to enlighten. So like in a way, like you see the like how it becomes like an corruption and straight. Like that's true for scientists. That's true for anybody that has that kind of like approach to it. So like here, what I understand is like don't make the various human questions particular to a certain group, as if they are superior to understand those, and like all the rest is just bottom of the barrel. So Quran is there to address every single human being in a way that like everyone can take some sort of share out of it. So that's why you cannot even speak of any kind of class or any kind of group. So that's why it speaks everyone equally.
That's, I just understand another thing here now when you said. So then maybe we should take when it says Quran speaks to everybody. Like when I first read it, I just took it as it speaks to everybody. It has to be understood by everyone and so on, which is true. But also from the other perspective, it means everybody has a right to understand it. Everybody has a tool, necessity tools to understand it.
That was the initial comment that I was trying to make, and somehow it evolved into mine. So like that's what I meant by like it is not an occupation.
Yeah.
It is not an occupation because it is something like very essential to every individual, every human being.
So I guess then the contrast is so big, which makes it like very artful. The Quran speaks of mighty matters, as we studied last week, matters as mighty as like the creation of the entire universe, future of the entire humanity, or past of the entire creation,
or your individual struggles.
But also it speaks to everyone. So, in other words, everybody has right and necessary tools to understand these or study these mighty matters to the extent he or she can do. Yes, this extent may change.
I mean, capacities may differ.
Yes, just like in science, not every scientists are equal. But at the same time, same way, not every person is equal, but everyone needs to study these mighty matters.
I was thinking about Osman's clergy example. In a sense, I kind of feel the same way in that when you said occupation, there's a certain religious jargon or terminology they like to use, which I think in a way makes it sound more convoluted or inaccessible or complex than it really is. And Norshi's saying, on the other hand, as you guys said, that not only does it address everyone has the right to understand it or to be addressed personally. And I think that is what does exist in the prevalent society today, unfortunately, is because it seems like, in a way, the people who speak, they speak because they think they have a certain authority, or because they know something or memorize something, then they know what they're speaking about. But I mean, going back to his original point, the all-wise Quran speaks of the universe in order to make the divine essence, attributes, and names known. In a way, I don't think, at least my experience, the people who claim to be speaking on behalf of the Quran essentially don't really address it from that perspective. By and large, is my experience.
Oh, Suhail, I just want to share this small anecdote. When you said this complex language they use, making things more complicated than they are, I was reading the article and then sharing with a friend a scientific article, and it was like too complicated. The language they were using is so complicated, even though the matter was so simple. And then we compare it with the writings of Einstein, which is so simple. Like, you would be very surprised when you read it, especially at least the parts that that we can understand. Not every part we can understand, or I can understand, but the parts that you can understand, especially the parts that he described the problem and then gives you the tools to solve it. Everything is so simple, so clear, we were saying like comparing two things. We were saying like how complicated or how important it could be what you are studying there, like compared to Einstein. Like what language you are using, like what is it that you're trying to solve? How complicated it could be compared to what Einstein solved. So yeah, that was.
And I guess also there's this implicit behavior or implicit science is implying as if it is solving the riddle of existence. It never speaks this out loud, but since nothing else is being spoken in the environment, there's this notion as if this is the explanation. So, I mean, if you ask the science, then especially in day-to-day popular language, people would say, yeah, science answers how question, but not why question. It's not the concern of science, whatever. But behind the scenes, this is what is being implied. And this becomes much more obvious when you go to textbooks. Like in maybe academic papers, the language is being more vague to hide this. But even in textbooks, it's being even more clear. I mean, as you go to media, it is being given much more clear. So if we are going to speak about, dictionary definitions doesn't work. So dictionary definition would be always on the safe side, saying that this is not the concern of science, blah, blah. But practically speaking, what Nursi is criticizing in here is taking place out there. So practically taking it for myself right now, I mean, now I'm trying to, we can come up with crystal clear definitions, this and that. But if I come back to my day-to-day life, am I feeling under pressure when a professor starts speaking with this jargon and the perfect English and then starts implicitly attacking my faith as if this guy really solved the riddle of existence with his title and everything, and look, since I am just still a student or something, for using all his credentials, trying to crush me. So if I'm really feeling crushed under this pressure, then this answer should make sense to me. And otherwise, trying to come up with definitions, it's necessary for some people out there. But in the lab, in the classroom, when my professor tries to crush me, or when I open YouTube and listen to one of those public speakers of atheism with their titles, professor titles, if I'm feeling crushed, then such a explanation is going to save me. So personally, I am more focused on this part of this explanation.
Refers to...
So Nursi in here saying that the reason that Quran doesn't speak like science is for two simple reasons. One is science is not really the truth, because the guy that's asking the question is as if assuming implicitly that science is speaking the truth. Why Quran is not speaking like it? So he's saying that no, science is not speaking the truth. This is the first thing. The second thing is Quran speaks to the general audience, and by definition it should, but science is just speaking the elect. Or
so referring to the text that yes.
Yeah. So if I am having this and I am convinced with this explanation, next time if a professor, no matter there, starts speaking with this jargon, I would feel pity for that person. Instead of he being crushed by that person, I will say that this guy just doesn't know what he's talking about.
I'll say to your point when you said the Quran, and Nursi said also it addresses everyone. I don't know if any of you are familiar, but I listen to a lot of these secular scientists. It's their project, and they say it overtly without any hesitation, that they want to bring scientific understanding of the world to the masses, how they understand the world, so that it eliminates the need for belief. Or they say religion, whatever, specifically. This general notion of religion. And that's why you see popular scientists, who try to address the masses in front of large audiences. Maybe that wasn't the case during the time of Nursi, but I think they realize that if they want their ideas to be prevalent, they must address the masses. And unfortunately, people are still fascinated by how they are able to describe the universe, never questioning, have they ever asked, do you explain the meaning from within themselves, the existence within themselves, or something not of their nature? But I mean, it's happening. Say, just as like Barkan was saying, people are trying to empirically analyze consciousness or intellect or the mind. The same thing is here, trying to popularize scientism.
I guess it's even more than popularizing it. It's like everybody has to know it. Everybody has to follow it, and this should be the way the regular people thinking in their life. Like if you're not following the scientific methodology in your life, you are doomed. Again, just like, the group of carpenters coming and telling me that everybody has to make furnitures. Otherwise, you are not intellectual.
You are not complete.
You are not complete. You are just stupid, spooky being. I guess this is the reality we are in. We have to accept that. Like when we talk about the science or philosophy, we're not talking about just an occupation. It's not just about a few people studying X or Y or Z in universities. As Suhail was saying, it's being conveyed to the masses in a way that the claim is everybody has to follow this. And you see that this is nothing but just a political agenda. It's not like a struggle for the illumination, because the things they try to convey to the masses are very like the selected ones. Like, for instance, the theory of evolution. I'm not here to discuss the evolution, I don't care. But there are like specific items that everybody has to know. For instance, nobody has to know thermodynamics. This is my usual example. I always ask, like, have you ever heard anybody saying that, like, people doesn't know about the thermodynamics, it's so important, we should teach them? I never heard that. Not even like the scientific circles. Most of the people, most of the scientists, including myself, up until recently, let's say, nobody knows about the thermodynamics, which is more fundamental than the theory of evolution. In any scientific research, it's much more fundamental. Nobody knows, nobody cares. If you're not studying thermodynamics specifically, you don't have to know thermodynamics. Nobody will try to convince you that the second law of the thermodynamics is a law that you have to believe. Nobody will try to convince you. And on the opposite, nobody will object it. Like, you don't even have to know about the empirical facts. When somebody comes and tells you that this is the second law of the thermodynamics, as a believer or not, you will say, okay, I believe this is the second law of the thermodynamics. I believe this is the part of the nature. When it comes to other things, like evolution, for instance, you have to know it. But I don't study biology, or I don't, care about, the history of the life, or how viruses today evolve and so on. It's not my job. I don't care. No, you have to know it. Otherwise, you're missing, part. Again, your intellectual capacities are questioned. So it's not a pursuit for illumination. It's not a action for illuminating people. It's a political agenda. We have to be aware of it. And again, like as a scientist, personally, I think making everybody scientists, it's nothing different than making everybody carpenters. This is how I see it, at least.
Since you made the political comments, I will have a small addition to it. having clergy in religion is equally the same thing, what you said about scientists. And the best example of that is the clergy feeding the kingdom, and the kingdom in exchange of like the legitimacy that you get from the clergy, feeding them in terms of whatever the expectations they have. I don't know specific. It's a vicious circle, and so you have two ruling class that feeding each other, one in terms of money and like power, like the other one in terms of legitimacy of the kingdom, which is completely against the spirit of Islam and teaching of Islam, leads to the corruption. So they are equally wrong and they are equally philosophy, if you like. But if you speak to those people who are part of the clergy, for their understanding, as far as their understanding, what is being talked about is like here is philosophy. So like the terms like are completely reversed and upside down.
You know, I was thinking when you brought this up, you know, what's popularized in Islam today is the law. So, you know, Birkan was saying you want to make everyone an evolutionary biologist at some level. In some way, I think a lot of these quote unquote religious, you know, privileged religious folk, these quote unquote scholars, they want to make everyone a jurist, in a sense, in a way that's kind of the objective, in order to what they think is to preserve or to promote Islam. But nowhere is there an address of the human side of things. You know, how do things exist fundamentally? Because you can't explain existence from the law. It's not possible. You know, when I mean by law, I mean, you know, the physical nature of the world. In a way, I think the same thing is prevalent today amongst Islam in that regard.
Can I add something? You know, like look at the requirements for entrance into each scientific subject, or like say every discipline has formed like a group or a club. Like in the medical field, everybody's together in a club, and look at the barriers to the entrance to that particular club. Same thing in computer science or any philosophy, or you have to go through a particular, you know, if you're interested, then you would go and through the stages, and, you know, or the same thing in the clergy. There is a particular like jurist, as you were saying, you have to go through a certain sequence, and everything is in the form of knowledge and information. Whereas what the Quran is saying is addressing everyone in the sense of their humans being human, you know, with their simple things are being mentioned, and that everybody from their human side is able to confirm, right? There is the easiest way to enter that particular, you know, club, if you may call it, but as compared to the other specialized ones, which are specific to their particular field. Like if you're not at a certain level in computer science, you're not there. You know, it's a whole different level of information and knowledge that has to be shared, where you have to have a particular background, whereas the Quran doesn't require all of that. Just everybody is equipped with that human senses and tools and qualities, and they are able to make sense of those things.
Yeah, and I think...
Yeah, I'm just saying, because it's not basically information or knowledge that is being, like, one is benefiting from. It's more of some things that, like, what they confirm is more within themselves. It's their human side that gets the satisfaction or the answers versus the, you know, like, I just wanted to make the distinction between, you know, belief versus information and knowledge.
Yeah, I to go back to Osman's original point about occupation, I think that's really the issue, is that we try to protect an occupation, whether it's, being a carpenter or a scientist or a clergyman. These are essentially occupations in the sense that, you know, you have a specific, entrance into that sort of profession, and then you're going to preach your profession to others or try to make people understand your profession for its own sake. I mean, specifically in terms of, clergy, I don't ever hear anyone ever addressing human questions by and large. It's always about what is the juridical aspect of a thing. And in a sense, they want to make everybody a sort of jurist in their own life. It's ridiculous when you think about it, but that's kind of what it's a reductionist view of the world, I guess. Does anybody else want to add anything here? We have a few minutes left. Okay, well, I was going to go on to the next sentence.
Oh, just a second, sorry.
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
I don't understand what you guys mean about clergy. Like, don't we need clergy? And even though they're talking about their jurisdictions or the laws, don't we need people that do these things? Like, I don't understand why you guys are criticizing these people. Can you explain that to me? Like, I didn't understand anything.
Why we
are criticizing clergy?
Okay.
And these people, these scholars.
So what do you understand from clergy?
Scholars, religious scholars.
Scholars in sense like a people studying things, or
yeah.
Scholars in the sense that like people studying.
What do you mean when you mean clergy? Maybe let's start from that.
I guess that's so. I feel like there's a distinction there. I'm not sure, or I don't think anybody would criticize anyone just because they're studying or trying to learn and teach. Like Nursi was a scholar, for instance, and I'm enjoying reading him.
And what are we criticizing? So I don't understand.
Maybe Osman, do you want to clarify what do you mean with clergy?
I think I'm referring to the institutions or institutionalized groups of people who, like we have been discussing, who think that religion, as well, like for example, philosophers, scientists who think that like they have the virtue of like understanding the subject so they can enlighten the others. So like those are those group of people who have like similar approach in religion and in religious subjects, whatever they might be. They think that like they are the virtue of understanding it, like let's say in specific, like they are the virtue of understanding the Quran to teach the others. Anyone, I don't know, like A, B, C, D, I'm not like referring to any specific names because I don't really like know like in terms of the individual, but anyone who has that kind of attitude, as far as I am concerned, is a part of the clergy. So to make it more simple, if someone, for example, even studying the Nursi himself, is not sitting like we do here, like is not sitting on the floor together with me in a circle to understand what the text or what the Quran is saying, and like whatever his understanding may be way above my understanding. But if he doesn't sit down together with me in a circle to read it together, study it together, and share it together to deepen the understanding of your like the reality of this like existence, that person is a part of the clergy. Like in other words, if there was someone here sitting on a couch and we were sitting in front of him, like on our knees, and he would be the only one who is reading it, and he would be the only one trying to teach what I am supposed to understand from the text, he's part of the clergy, if that makes sense.
It doesn't make sense, but let's move on.
Maybe just you have
I disagree, I think.
perfectly fine, but I think you should reflect on that for some time.
I'll add one thing to what Osman said, is that in addition to what he said, it's, and Nursi, I think, is brilliant in doing this, is that he doesn't take away agency from the individual in trying to critically think. It's a conversation. You know, as Osman was saying, he's sitting with you in discussion. He can be a master, but he doesn't, like a scientist comes to you as an authority figure to say, this is how you should think about the world, and that's it. There's no discussion to be had. Even if it contradicts how you yourself understand the world. You know, maybe you're like, well, maybe the things don't look towards themselves. They look to something not of their nature. The scientist says, no, that's not the case. It's, the door is shut. And to me, that's the issue. If the one discussing the Quran doesn't address it from the perspective that it addresses everyone, not just that individual, but all individuals, so that a discussion can be had, then that's the issue, I think. So I don't think it's a criticism of scholarship, but it's the notion that when you make it, and I like the word Osman used, is a sort of occupation. When you turn it into become a scientist and say, I am the authority figure and this is how things are, that's when it becomes problematic, because that's antithetical, that's contradictory to how Nursi is describing the Quran itself, in that it addresses everyone. So I think that's kind of the broader point.
I think it is also contradictory to the practices of the Prophet. Like, as I may be wrong and ignorant of it, but as far as I know, like other than the khutbah, like there is no narrations of the fact that Prophet was speaking to the people in a pulpit. On a pulpit.
On a pulpit, what is it?
Kürsü, like higher bar. Other than the khutbah, the Prophet's practices himself was in halaka, in circle. That's where halaka comes from. That's where actually Sahabe comes from. Sahabe is the people who you converse with, who you have like conversation with.
So I guess that just to reiterate what I understood from what you're saying, since we are studying prophethood right now, the criticism in here is not to have teachers. Since the very beginning, we are saying that there needs to be human manifestation of the message. So this is what we have been talking so far. But I guess the part that is being criticized here is, as in scientists, if somebody is hiding behind jargons and getting some sort of superiority for himself or herself because of this expertise that he is doing it, and in the case of scientists, it would be somebody would saying that, yeah, I have, let's say, learned evolution, and since you do not know it, you are lacking, and I am superior because I know it. If the same behavior manifests itself when it comes to religion, saying that I am superior than you are because I know I have this knowledge of, let's say, it might be Arabic, it might be fiqh, it might be a hadith, it might be risale, whatever, but in terms of knowledge, if somebody is using this as a superiority, and definitely this is a problem of behavior, and definitely it's arrogance. If it is, as Birkanab was saying in terms of when he was talking about materialism, so as you said, even if we are discussing angels, by trying to explain it within itself, the same behavior can manifest itself in there. So likewise, in here, when it comes to when somebody is dealing with religion, this doesn't really change the way that the problem is getting resolved. Still, it's a problem. So for a person who studies Quran, tries to understand the Quran, must be converted or changed with the message of Quran so that he becomes an abd, not like a king. So,
self-ascribed virtue, like that's where the problem is.
Yeah. So this is the part that is, I guess, problematic. So how can you pinpoint this? Pointing your finger, this is the person that does this. Yeah, this cannot definitely be done.
And it's not, at that point, it's not up to judge like this person or that person. Like because then you are putting, like when you judge people like that, then you are putting yourself in a position that you are ascribing some sort of virtue to yourself. But when it comes to practices, if somebody, personally speaking, this is something very personal, principle. If somebody speaks to me in that kind of manner, I just walk away from it. I mean, that's my personal principle that I always apply to myself. Whether like that it like works out for people or not, that's a different story. Like every individual is obviously like unique and free in terms of dealing with this kind of matters.
I guess ending the discussion with the freedom is a good idea always. Since it's time, if you don't mind, Sohail, it's time to. But before ending, I guess just as a highlight, that was a good question actually. Because at first I didn't understand the importance, but now I see it more clearly. I guess such discussions shouldn't. This is my, of course, again the personal thought, but such discussions shouldn't lead us to destroy everything we have. Like having teachers or scholars, with your words, at least to me, it's something very precious.
And just one small thing. We said that Quran addresses everyone, for example. I don't speak Arabic, I don't know Arabic. So how does Quran address me in this sense, right? So I definitely I'm in need of someone who can at least explain me the language itself. So I mean, by that, definitely we are still in need of somebody else to teach us. But again, what Usman was saying is, but this shouldn't mean that that person is given the authority to play the role of a scientist. And I am criticizing it when the scientist is a secular person. But when it comes to religion, I shouldn't be allowing the same behavior to be manifesting under the guise of this religion.
It would be self-contradictory, right? Like to say that like we don't need a teacher, it would be self-contradictory with the subject that we have been studying for the last 2 months. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like shouldn't be taking the other extreme. Like when we made it, like make sure that like we understand the context, what the context we are speaking of, and we understand the subject within that context.
Inshallah. So let's conclude for this week, and inshallah we can continue with the same discussion next week. Jazakallah everyone. Let's conclude inshallah.
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.